CIA smuggles drugs while Wachovia and Wells Fargo launder them and give the proceeds to the owners of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now the IRS takes money out of every single check. Money they created out of thin air and leave you with debt. They want to make you a serf, a slave to their demand. They want to take your life every way they can. Fluoride, GMO, vaccines, chemtrails, United Nations genocide. The world they show us is not real. This is how they kill and steal. Rothschild, Bundy, Rockefeller, Club of Rome. On the Georgia Guidestones written in stone. Cut through the matrix, awaken to the lies. Do not be hypnotized. We are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, this is Howard Nema of We Are Change Connecticut, and you are watching Truth Talk News. And we are talking from yesterday's show about the foundations. Now we have a lot of discussion about how this whole New World Order control grid actually came to be. And it did really come to be, as we were learning from last night's broadcast, that it does absolutely come from these foundations that were started in the mid-1800s, first being the Peabody Foundation. And then I'll go into more of guests today. As I said yesterday, we're probably going to do most of this week regarding these foundations and information about them, because there is so much information and it will take quite a bit of time. And again, the information here has been well documented. This is a work that I have to give credit to the late Eustace Mullins, who was able to compile this over 50 years of his career as a researcher and author, writer. And as we were talking about the Rockefellers' front person, his right-hand man, Frederick Gates, Daniel Coit Gilman, Vice President of the Peabody Fund and the Slater Fund. Now these guys got together and they sort of modeled all of their other foundations after the Peabody Foundation. And they are all preaching we're going to, for the benefit of medical science, for the benefit of humanity, for peace. Yeah, like the Carnegie Institute for Peace. International peace. They're all fronts. They're all, in many cases, just the opposite. So it's very important to break this thing down, to see how this is happening. And I think that a key component is understanding that they have pooled their resources as a collective group of families to obtain this control. They want to have a technocracy that is controlled by them, that the little useless eaters such as ourselves, the true useless eaters, get cut off, and which are most of us in their eyes. And then those that can really, play ball with and are sharp enough to their liking will remain. So they'll have this group of a master race of humanity, a transhumanist, better than human. Again, gone into that a lot with other broadcasts. But these funds that have been set up were set up really to just avoid paying taxes and to start putting in this movement towards communism and world government and all of these things that have transpired in the last 60 years. So it's interesting, and again, I'm going to read a lot of the stuff from here. We had left off talking about the beginnings of the Carnegie Institute. Now, Gilman, who was Daniel Coit Gilman, vice president of the Peabody Fund and the Slater Fund, he was also president of the University of California. He was the original incorporator of the Russell Sage Foundation and the Carnegie Institute. The fact that one man was an incorporator of three of the most influential foundations in America shows how centralized the control of these supposedly autonomous foundations has always been by a few ruthless individuals. Gilman is usually listed as a charter member of the World Order because he, together with Andrew Dixon White, Timothy Dwight, also set up the Russell Trust at Yale in 1856 to finance the Skull and Bones organization, whose members are leading frontmen in America: W. Averell Harriman, Vice President George Bush, former President Bush, George Bush, and former President Bush, because again in 1985 George Bush was Vice President, and propagandist William Buckley of the National Review. Typical members, there's a lot of people. Norman Dodd, also a Yale man, said, "It's well known on campus that if you were tapped for bones, you would never have to worry about success in later life." That certainly is true. Of the three founders of this order, Dwight became president of Yale. White was the son of a railroad millionaire and was said by the New York Times to have inherited enough money to make him free from care for life. He became the first president of Cornell University and gave the institution $300,000 to set up its School of Government. He became the first president of the American Historical Association and was U.S. ambassador to Russia from 1892 to 1894, and ambassador to Germany from 1897 to 1902. His final legacy was to advise Herbert Hoover to set up the Hoover Institution. However, it's with his third founder, Daniel Coit Gilman, with whom we are most concerned. Gilman trained John Dewey in collectivist theories of education at Johns Hopkins University. Dewey went on to head the University of Chicago's School of Education and later Teachers College at Columbia University, two of the leading Fabian socialist schools in the world. Gilman, through his protege, Dewey, has dominated American education through the 20th century. It is pretty much true. Gilman also trained Richard Ely at the Johns Hopkins Department of Economics, later taught Woodrow Wilson. Tremendous influence into this whole control of how they were going to teach, what they were going to teach, and how they were going to show people, and what they were going to be given through these indoctrinated, really they're indoctrination programs, education. It's not education, it's indoctrination. That's the terrifying fact. That's what's really, really prevalent, and people have to understand that. That's why everything is done in such a way that it's to indoctrinate people. Remember, Rockefeller told the president, Nixon, we don't need, or earlier actually, it was, he said a couple of, actually it was Nelson Rockefeller, it was Nixon. We don't need thinkers, we need workers. So they really amped it up, the dumbing down of the society from the 70s on. So that's why we are in a situation where we are now, with a faltering education system that's been put into place by design, while certain people just rise to the top by certain privileged classes and privileged orders and people of means who have the ability to go forward, where the rest of the society is slowly being brought down to like serfdom status. So if you can be one of these master race people, these great ones, the succeeders, the achievers, okay, then you will survive and do well and flourish in the New World Order. But if not, you become a useless eater. And that's really what it comes down to. And they're doing it intentionally, so the people that have a few things, you have a couple of cars, a house, everything's always on on the edge of collapse, right? If you have that, whatever you have, in the average American, whatever they have, is they're living paycheck to paycheck, on the verge of collapse at any moment. Bills, debts, lower incomes, less hours, longer commutes, all these things basically have brought society's standard of living down in the last 10 years dramatically. I mean, think about it. Who do you blame? You're going to blame Bush? You're going to blame Obama? Don't blame them. They're puppets. It's the world order. It's these people that have been put together through these foundations, which created all of these other societies and secret societies to do their bidding. In this case, we can continue on because we know that Gilman also trained Richard Ely. He also taught, Ely had later taught Woodrow Wilson, who he described as unusually brilliant. And Gilman's influence extended through Ely to Woodrow Wilson, who gave the Federal Reserve System, the income tax, and the First World War. So their influences worked together because, of course, the Teachers College at Columbia University, two of the leading Fabian socialist schools, is where they met up. Of course, Woodrow Wilson was the president of Princeton University before he ran for president. He later admitted that he had unwittingly betrayed his country by giving these bankers control of the nation's wealth, basically. Because look what they've done with it. What have they done with it? They've stolen it. Where's the gold? There's no more gold. I don't think there's an ounce of gold anywhere. I think they've sold it all off. And that's another big lie. And all these things, when the secrets come out, oh my God, what are they going to do? Well, you'll never know. We'll never get to that level. You'll never learn the truth. That's what they're hoping. We'll deny it to death. Let's just go to Fort Knox and just demand, the people demand an audit of the gold reserves, demand an audit of the Federal Reserve. These criminals who've hijacked our government and influence us through the Council on Foreign Relations with their State Department protocols coming directly from these collectivists. Anyway, getting back to Mullen's great work. Excuse me. Getting back to this great work that he has here. I'm going to focus on a few things because now we're talking about all these different funds. Now, the Skull and Bones, where we have also the fact that the Cornell University and all these connections to Russia, and then having the Russian Revolution, all of these things tie together. The bankers funding the Bolsheviks to overthrow the Tsar, a tremendous foe of the Rothschild influence for like at least 100 years at that point. So it's very well, it's 60, 70 years, but it was a tremendous problem because they hated one another. The Rothschilds hated the entire Romanov family, the bloodline, and they killed the bloodline. That's what they did. And anyone that survived, if they're lucky enough to survive, have changed their names to maybe like Roman or something else, or moved to another country. I don't know. But there is supposedly the family was killed, and Anastasia, the big story about Anastasia being one of the people that was actually who survived the bloodthirsty murder, which occurred like 3 months after the Tsar had abdicated power and gave up. They wanted to kill him, and they did. They killed him brilliantly. And the bankers, again, collectivize, and the corporations always move along. Yet we think that it's always because of we're going to keep the world safe for democracy, or we're going to keep the world safe from terrorism. it's always really just a very thinly veiled cloak of the fact that they're attempting to make war and continue a war machine. Now you would say, well, why would they want war? It's terrible. War is horrible. Well, the answer is many. So certainly there's a financial answer to it. Certainly there's a financial reason why the military-industrial complex is so expanded through our government and is so entrenched, and we spend almost $1 trillion a year on military and intelligence and surveillance and Big Brother and everything else. So when you spend that kind of money, I mean, you have to look at it and say, well, $1 trillion a year, and people are starving, and and where's this money going? Well, it's going to these defense contractors who are making more war, and then the more war they make, the more bombs and tanks and helicopters and rocket launchers and all these things they need. And more so than that, they kill young souls. And believe it or not, that's a big motivation. It's power for them to take the young lives. They love it. I know it sounds crazy, but they really do. Recently, I couldn't even believe it. I saw this report that, whether or not it's real or not, I did see the report. It's on a couple of different sources, stating that these elite at the Bilderbergs, they had, some people had, I guess they intercepted a box that was being delivered, and they opened it to see what was in it. And what was in it was fetuses and babies up to several months old that were dead and roasted and then covered with gold. You can't make this stuff up. Google it. Roasted babies covered with gold found. Now this is also leading from another story where it actually occurred and somebody was caught with these things in someplace else, and it's related somehow. I didn't really get too much more information on that, but again, it's just commentary, because I read these things as well, and I sometimes I can't even fathom how evil these people are. But you have to understand how they're maintaining this control. Like they have the Rita Zellweger connection, they're giving all these companies that the books, the school books for the children, and the medical books for the doctors, all these things. And now we have the understanding of this is the way it is. You go to the school, and the school gives you the book, and you pay this exorbitant amount of money for the books. And this is what they teach you. And this is how it works. And you better do it. You better get into deep debt, $200,000-300,000 if you're trying to have a good career, and hopefully it will bankrupt you, because you can't wipe that debt away. You can't, if you do bankruptcy, you're nothing. Not student loan debt. Yeah. Put up all this debt into all these different areas, and have these degrees that are useless, because the jobs for them are not there. Obama's going to be saying that he's looking for jobs here. He's giving jobs, 3 million jobs, 4 million jobs he created in each year. 1 million jobs a year. 1 million jobs a year. I mean, it's like you have 20 million people unemployed. If you got a million. At least. It would be something if he was trying, and he was really like not a shill and a fraud like he is. You can almost like, okay, but that's what everyone's believing. That's the big lie again. Oh, he's doing the best he can. Look what did Bush do? See, it's always this back and forth bullshit. No. What are the elites that have these foundations, that created these foundations, and other organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderberg Group and these other organizations? The United Nations, of course, is the crux of the world government, and they'll utilize that as their way of getting everybody drawn in And then they're already putting these mandates. I mean, UN mandates with guns, gun bans. They are after all rights. It is the Communist Manifesto. And they are playing it out. They loved it. When it was going through there, the bankers were all behind it back in the 30s when it was all trendy, in the 20s and 30s. There's a whole big little trendy thing going on there for a while with this communism thing. Alright? Wasn't all so bad. It wasn't, oh, the communists. No, it wasn't that way. They were the patriots. They were going to get away the Tsar's tyranny, the tyranny of the Tsar in Russia. I mean, look at history. Really understand it. Okay, so back to this fantastic work, which I recommend anyone can get the PDF. You just go to World Order and Google that, and it'll show you. There'll be their PDFs. It's free. It's available. Everybody should read it. It's so detailed. I mean, it's just amazing. But getting into the deepness, which is great because we still have a nice amount of time here, and I just want to talk about the Federal Reserve, as we are knowing that we're coming to the end of this year. There's going to be an end of the charter. Now, it's very hush-hush. No one's really talking about it. But sure enough, as God made little apples, he'll just shuck something through underneath the carpet at the end, and some new charter for another 100 years of slavery, furthering this misery. Or worse, they will decide that they don't want to do it, and that they need to get payment, which is what a lot of people are fearing, and that would cause, of course, a collapse, because they feel that the equities that they have due to this big marginal collapse, the values of the assets that they have are requiring such, the fact that the government owns nothing. I mean, the Federal Reserve criminal banksters own our debt, majority of it. So what's going to happen? They own our debt. They could call our debt it's debt. They could start seizing assets, saying that there are bank failures and these other things, and start seizing assets. Like China has a lot of our assets, and coastlines, and places like California, the port of San Francisco, I think it is, they own the port. There's like a whole port that they own now. It's happening. All the stuff that we're talking about, the New World Order, it's not like something, let's stop it from happening. It's present tense, and the more I think about it, it's so around us, and at the same time, nobody really, the average person, is not aware of it. They just think, oh, that's, what are you going to do? That's what it is. They accept the tyranny. They don't look at it like they feel there's nothing they can do. But the more you learn about history, then you know what you can do. You can call these criminals out for who they are. But the first thing you need to do is to learn and to research on your own. Like I said, read this work. I'm going to go into it here because we're talking about the importance of the Federal Reserve. Peabody, again, the Peabody Trust, was appointed the first director of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1914, and he served during the crucial years of World War I until 1921. He was an enthusiastic supporter of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and later became a director of FDR's Warm Springs Foundation and the Hampton Institute. Louise Ware writes in her biography of Peabody, he added that the national crisis, World War I, when every man was needed, should ensure the Negro opportunity. Peabody was chairman of the Combustion Engineering Corporation, president of Broadway Realtors, director of Mexican Lead Company, Mexican Coal and Coke, Mexican Railways, National Railways, Tetsulian Copper Refining and Smelting, and served as treasurer of the Democratic National Party. Okay, so he was dealing in coal, coke, and lead and railways, and oh yeah, pretty big guy, this guy, eh? Now, despite his capitalist background, Peabody was an avowed socialist, and Ware notes that he wrote to Norman Thomas, said that I've been of the most sympathetic to an individual socialist aspirations, but I have particularly observed the Fabian system of England with hopeful anticipations. Oh, how nice. Yes. Anyway, the General Education Board, which was the predecessor or the beginnings, the seeds of the Department of Education and the dumbing down of society, began here with this guy Ware, Louise Ware, actually her name is Ware, and this is noted that the General Education Board should be the guiding force behind all educational developments in the U.S., and it has been since 1910. The Springfield Republican noted this back in 1866. So for anyone who knows anything of the subject, they know that Peabody and his partners in London gave us no faith and no help in our struggle for national existence. They participated to the full in common with English distrust of our cause and success. Yes, you see, success of the fact they acted in the interests of the South rather than for our nation. No individual contributed more to flooding our money markets with evidence of our debt in Europe and breaking down their prices and weakening financial confidence in our nationality than George Peabody. That's right. George Peabody was one of the main reasons why the South was just devastated and again through a designed implosion. Very deep. I don't want to go into it too much right now, but you look into the financial aspects of this order in the Civil War, and my God, what they did to the South. Oh, it's the same thing that they're planning to do again. Really, imagine, but it's not the South. It's like, you know, it's like now it's just debt. We're just debt laden, and they're just going to come and take things. And if you don't have the money, well, I'm sorry, you're going to have to give this up. You know. Carpetbaggers, remember that? That's what we're facing here, because it's like, I mean, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be a slowly, everyone just keeps giving up their property that they have, and then they have nothing, and then we have to suck on the government tip, because literally they have no choice, actually. Many will be left destitute. It's not fear-mongering, it's like, this is where it's heading. It can't continue, but they want to continue to add debt to the situation, so that when it does implode and this starts happening, they can come back as the saviors and do it again and again. Each time bringing society closer and closer to a serfdom with a division between the wealthy and the poor and no middle class at all. Come on, wake up. Look at the people that in your lifetimes, everybody that's watching and listening to this ever. In your lifetime, what has happened? Wages have diminished. Costs have skyrocketed. It's intentional. It's just intentional. It's gradual. Debt has been outrageously poured upon us. Programs. Now, we were all warned of this. This is all like, this isn't anything that you know. And 40 years ago, when you had people like Robert Welch from the John Birch Society warning about this and what they're doing, he was looked at as a nut, an insane lunatic. But actually, just about everything that he's stated has come to pass. And this is the root of it. This is where it comes from. And a great example, again, from the world order. So back in those days, cocaine was legal. So yeah, let's Mexican lead, coal, and coke. Why not? Let's do it. You gotta love it. I don't think it's really cocaine. It would be, actually, wouldn't surprise me, but could be. Anyway, then of course, being head of the Democratic National Party, knowing former President Clinton's affinity for the substance, you know, anything is possible. But you know, joking aside, this is a great work. And moving on, the George Peabody Company was responsible for most of the problems. I'm going to go back to this quote from the Springfield Republican in 1866. The Peabodys and his partners gave no faith and no help in the struggle for our national existence. They participated to the full in the common distress of our cause, as I mentioned, and our success, and talked and acted for the South rather than for our nation. No individual contributed so much to flooding our money markets with the evidence of our debt in Europe and breaking down their prices and weakening financial confidence in our nationality than George Peabody, who, of course, is the founder of the first foundation. And all the money that Mr. Peabody is giving away so lavishly through this foundation among our institutions of learning was gained by the speculations of his house in our misfortunes. And that's basically the truth. Back in 1866, a year after the war ended, because the whole country was really in a shambles, but the South was devastated, and they sucked it up for pennies on the dollar. It was really a terrible period in history, Reconstruction, one of the darker times in American history. And it's, again, not really taught in school. They don't go into it. They don't go into it deeply. But there were riots and race riots and lynchings and the Ku Klux Klan, and it got even more out of control than anyone really remembers. It was a very serious period of time. It brought a lot of vitality and work to the nation and started the Industrial Revolution's real bang after that war, because of the fact that so much had to be rebuilt. So there was, anyway, I don't want to talk about the Civil War. I can do a whole show on that. But did a lot of research on the Civil War as well. But through the orders, I mean, I've studied the Civil War in history. I was always in school, and they don't teach you anything that's true. They teach you parts of the truth, and then lies, specific lies. They actually are there, right in the front. They don't even mention a connection between these Canadian international bankers and the murder of President Lincoln, and the fact that they funded the operation, and that utilizing Booth basically as a willful patsy who didn't realize he was a patsy. He thought he was doing everything that he was doing for his purpose, the way history remembers him. However, these bankers were counting on him succeeding so that they would be able to move things along their agenda, which had to do with the banking reform acts that were changing, and Johnson's help through Reconstruction. Very, very interesting segment of history. Again, look into this. Research is key. It's fun, actually. You start looking into things that, they've got you so programmed to just watching television, to just being in this, this alpha suggestive state where, you're just given this stuff to drivel on and just keep your brain moving, instead of, really looking for things to do. The same thing with being active. I mean, too many people are tied to their desks, tied to their their world is a small place. They don't go outside. They don't take beauty into nature. It's part of this whole thing. Everyone's sort of getting plugged into this. And then those that are moving around, even if you are sort of active, you're a slave to this little, thing in your hand that you got to, constantly call people and text people and take pictures and surf the internet, and it's so distracted by the media and other distractions that are put in your face. Anyway, I'm getting off the subject but it's all really related. Again, that spiderweb of evil that meets in the middle, the bottomless pit of evil. That is the New World Order. So let's talk about these criminals a little more. Now, Peabody was also a big front for the Rothschilds, and the Peabody Fund's establishment was intended to give them political and financial control over the impoverished South, as I just mentioned. Or that would be, again, the inauguration of the era of foundations as the controlling factor in American life. So they utilized, again, a Hegelian dialectic. So they, these people are all starving. We're going to create these foundations because we're these beautiful, wealthy people, and we're going to be benevolent, and oh yes, 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 and continue this for all the good of humanity, and everyone signed on to it and thought it was great. John D. Rockefeller used General Education Board funds through Standard Oil representatives in Russia to provoke the Russian Revolution in 1905, and no wonder the Soviet masses cheer when a Rockefeller arrives to visit them. To date, the Rockefellers have given more than $5 billion from stock income, meaning that Americans have had to ante up billions in dollars in taxes which would otherwise have been revenue on this income. Congressman Wright Patman, chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee, proved in 1967 hearings that 14 Rockefeller foundations held assets of more than $1 billion in Standard Oil stock. Not only did they pay no tax on this stock, but it gave them permanent control over the family-owned firm. Rival financiers could not buy control of Standard Oil because its stock was insulated by foundation ownership, like the Federal Reserve criminal bank. Okay? Same thing, and the criminal IRS. Okay. Now, as Patman pointed out, the fact that the Rockefellers escaped paying huge sums in taxes gave them an unsurpassed market advantage over other firms which had to pay normal rates of taxation. The agitation for increased corporation taxation adds to Rockefeller's advantage, Patman said. The foundations are best investments in the best investments the Rockefeller family could ever have made. Of course, they created the whole concept of it. The family member of the board, of course, the late Senator Nelson Aldrich, another one of these criminals that was complicit in the founding of the Federal Reserve, shepherded the General Education Board through Congress. The Rockefeller Foundation charter proved more difficult. It was a flagrant effort to evade government decrees against the Standard Oil monopoly, but was finally pushed through in 1913 by Senator Robert F. Wagner of New York, who ended up becoming mayor, setting aside $50 million in Standard Oil of New Jersey stock for charitable work. The Rockefeller Foundation charter was signed on May 22nd, 22. Very powerful day. For those of you that are not aware of the power of the number 22, that is the most powerful Illuminati Masonic number of all. May 22nd, 1913, 5/22/1913. Interesting. Important. Very important. It's incorporated with John D. Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller Jr., Henry Pratt Judson of the Lyman and Pratt families, President of University of Chicago. It goes on and on. A whole bunch of little people like that you would know nobody's names you would know of. Simon Flexner. But these are all people that had served under Rockefeller in the institutes since 1903 as professors of medicine. Starr Jameson and John D. Rockefeller and his benevolences, Jerome Green. There's quite a list. Again, it's sort of boring you with names that these people are all dead anyway, a long time ago. But fact is that that's how they did it, and that's how they set it up, and that's what they did, and that's one of the ways they grew. And then again, their interests were horrific. What they did, as far as forget about the criminal element here, it's the wars, the genocide. The genocide. It's just awful. They basically, hey, yeah, sure, here, let's get a war going so we can sell arms and kill people. Too many people anyway. They're truly sociopathic psychopaths because they have no empathy for they don't care. They really have no consideration for mankind. Their goals are set in stone and they must be followed. And they were set in stone long before them. Before the people that are currently doing it was following what their fathers did and following what their fathers did. That's the New World Order. That's how it works. Unbelievable. So we have, again, all these people that were involved in the Federal Reserve on the board making war from the beginning. And that's what they've done ever since. Covert war as well. Military actions. Military kinetic actions right now. Anyway, there's a list of officers for the Rockefeller Foundation. Reveals a great deal about the organization. The 4 chairmen of the board have been J.D. himself, Walter Stewart, John Foster Dulles, and John D. Rockefeller III. Walter D. Stewart served with Bernard Baruch on the War Industries Board in 1918 and was the Federal Reserve Board from 22 to 25. These are people that are all involved with the politics, and he was also the economic advisor of the Bank of England and special advisor of the Bank of International Settlements. Again, another way of fleecing the people. These banks launder drug money. They're again part of this order to bring in world government. Now, on October 3rd, 1908, the Democratic National Committee was considered the advisory of making a public statement that William Nelson Cromwell, a French speculator, and with a French speculator named Bernard Varilla, formed a syndicate at the time when it was quite evident the U.S. would take over the rights of the French bondholders. So Charles P. Taft, brother of William Howard Taft, the future president, and Douglas Robinson, or the former president, brother-in-law of President Theodore Roosevelt, these financiers invested their money because of a full knowledge of the intent of the United States government to acquire the French property at a price of about $40 million, and thus, because of the alleged information from the government sources, were unable to reap a rich profit. Now, they did this. This has been going on. Now, they just recently passed a law that these criminal senators can't do this. They can't get inside information and profit from it. But they were doing it all the way back then, and probably long before this. And this is in 1908. It's unbelievable. Again, going into this work is so deep. There's so much, and a lot of it is, you don't want to bore you with all the names because it's so detailed that it's on record who these people were. But the companies are real important, so I'll try to clarify this. Now you have Kuhn, Loeb, and Company, who are, again, founders of the Federal Reserve Bank, and also had the interests in mind here when they were putting this together. The Federal Reserve, the seeds of it were put together between 1908 and then, of course, the Jekyll Island visit in 1910, where the Democratic leaders got together with attorneys for the Panama Canal Combine, Kuhn and Loeb, the Harriman Interest, the Sugar Trust, and the Standard Oil Trust, all these people. And these leaders identified Cromwell as their lawyer, and the Democrats continued. Now, what they did was they practically ran the War Department. A private citizen, Mr. Cromwell, allowed him to run the War Department to the behest of these major corporations, these interests, Kuhn and Loeb, Panama Canal Combine, Harriman Interest, the Sugar Trusts, and Standard Oil. Well, we know that Smedley Butler, General Smedley Butler, who was miffed that they've sent him down to the Philippines to protect Standard Oil's interests there, which is what we do. We go to protect other countries, other companies' interests in other countries, not the people's interests. We're supposed to be protecting the national interests of our government, but it's not. The companies are important because of that. No, it's important to bring globalization in and to deindustrialize and to open these. We need free trade. There is no free trade. These criminals have hijacked everything. They've got everything done. I mean, all the corporations they operate without borders. They produce their products where the cheapest. They can make them the cheapest. They take jobs away from Americans and other people of other countries too, but really bad here because the jobs are just leaving here. These companies that are our American companies, they're American companies. are hiring, you know, foreigners. You pick up your phone for customer service and you've got India. I mean, it's cheaper for them to have somebody in India. This can't be right. We're literally bringing ourselves into this pit. We are digging our own grave between the trade imbalance with the profits. And they say, oh, it's the unions. Well, they always say they've been after the unions for years. It's not the unions. It's the banks. The criminal cartel. That's who it is. They are basically, again, all of these bankers that we got going right through the names. We're about to discuss them. I could really read them all off, but they're here on page. Let's see. Well, actually, the page numbers wouldn't coincide with the work because this is just the chapter, and I made it in order. Again, this is part 7, which is the chapter 7, which is the of the world order, which is the foundations. But the names are like, they're all familiar names to people. Especially the banks, the old banks that are no longer here, like National City Bank, which is now, then it became the Citibank. But the names of it, Sloan Kettering Institute, again, this whole thing, Sloan Kettering having all of this loving, oh, it's so good, they're the best, you know, they're the best with radiation and chemotherapy and all, and pushing this big pharma, this Rockefeller-induced big pharma fraud, while they crush down on anybody that has holistic treatments and they try to make it criminal. I mean, God damn it, when Mayor Bloomberg wants you to not be able to have a soda that's over 21 ounces, I mean, it's nanny state. It's worse. They want to condition you to this. It's terrible. You should be able to do whatever you want. Whatever that is. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, you have the right to do anything you want. That's basically, that's freedom. As long as you're not injuring or harming another life, another soul, another person, that's it. You should be able to be free to do whatever you want. But no, you're driving too fast, you don't have your seatbelt on, you know, I don't know, there's too much salt in the in the food. I mean, it's just all this stuff. I mean, yeah, all right, great. So that's also a big fraud, the whole thing with the salt. People get these diseases from taking these big pharma drugs. That's the truth. That's how come diabetes is on the rise, and eating this GMO garbage by these corporations, Nabisco and these other corporations with all their processed foods. America got addicted to processed foods that give you these diseases. Oh, but they're not going to ever take blame for it. And there'll be no we can't prove that. Yeah. Well, why was it less than 100 years ago when there were no processed foods like this, because technology didn't advance to that stage, where all these problems didn't exist? Why is it since we've been putting all this stuff into the food supply and the water and chemtrails in the air and everything else that's going on around us? It's all to help to reduce us to a docile flock of sheep. Well, we must be wolves. Speaking of wolves, we have Harry Link, Death to the New World Order, here on truthbroadcastnetwork.com, coming up in just about 12 minutes. Tune in for that show. It's awesome. He's just got back from Bilderberg. We haven't really chatted since he's back. I'm certainly looking forward to. We made plans to get together and do mutual broadcasts down at 9/11 this year, down at Ground Zero, and we will be spending time doing that. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be awesome. And he's back with some great footage and a great interview with Jim Tucker, who's been tracking Bilderberg for the better part of 40 years. And that should be an awesome interview. I haven't heard it as of yet, but it's up on truthbroadcastnetwork.com, I believe. And you can, again, reach us all there. And also, let's give a shout-out to Pam Suggs at UnitedTruthSeekers.com, who helps get the message out and helps spread these broadcasts virally across the various people that we have. I mean, we have so many groups. It's crazy. It takes like hours to send these things out, and a lot of effort. And thanks to her, I guess I'll also have to thank Roger Landry, who's been putting together a television network that We the People Network with a television network, which is going to be in different countries, a real television network that is going to be broadcasting in like 100 countries, or I think 120 or something like that. Similar to the TalkStream Live type setup. So things are moving. Now he's a big help. He's done a lot. We're still in the process of getting the servers. He's going to help me do that. It's just he's been very busy with this television thing, which is amazing. And again, we'll all be part of it. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be great. And thank you again, Roger Landry, for We the People Network. Of course, can't stop thinking about my good friend Jim as well at We Are Change Connecticut, who's doing so much to get this information about fluoride out. In fact, we have a guy, I forget his name, who in 1966 petitioned the government here in Connecticut against them putting in this fluoride. And he fought it for some time. He's still alive. He's like 71 years old now. And we're going to be doing an interview with him. I don't know if it's going to be live on air or it's going to be a video, but I'm looking forward to that, giving his perspective on what's going on now. Because here in Connecticut, there's a state referendum that was put into place for fluoride, and We Are Change Connecticut is taking an initiative to get signatures. We're trying to get 20,000 signatures to take some action against this and to have people really take a look at this. We have doctors, we have many statements from physicians and others against it. We also have documented evidence of the dangers of fluoride. When fluoride spills, they have contamination crews coming for it. I mean, it is poison, ladies and gentlemen. It is rat poison. It is also the main component in Prozac, which we all know is so loving and gives everybody suicidal tendencies to go nuts and kill people as well. Homicidal tendencies as well. Okay, so that said, back to the meat here, the nitty-gritty. These foundations. Now, the secretaries of the Rockefeller Foundation, who were all put into place here and have been sort of lineage. It is a bloodline. It is a club. You don't say I want to go audition, or I should say I want to go look for a job at the Rockefeller Foundation. And it's not going to work that way. An opportunity would arise for you, and you would be selected. That's how it works. The same thing with all of these organizations, like Obama was selected, Council on Foreign Relations, selected because of his legend, his created legend. He was selected to have this legend of who he is. This Barry Soetoro, this other person. It's called a legend. Very, very interesting and very, very true. You have the CIA puts together a dossier of complete storyline, complete life history, even then starts to implement that into societies, into the way that it works. And then you're put together. Whatever your previous life is forgotten, and the new life goes on. It's done quite frequently. And in this case, we have a president who happened to be doing his internship at the Council on Foreign Relations. He happened to be dating a princess. I mean, you know, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So anyway, just trying to amplify the connections. And that's what this is. These are connections. You want to call them connections. You want to call them nepotism. I call it despotism. That's what I call it. So, of course, that's just a couple of the funds. The Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Trust, all founded basically by the Peabody money. You have so many different offshoots of it. International Health Board, General Education Board, International Education Board, the Red Cross and the Atlantic Council. All these things are all connected. Secretary of War, people of that nature. are always involved in these foundations. For example, in World War I, we had Martin A. Ryerson, who was the president of the Board of Trustees of the University of Chicago. He was also the trustee of the Carnegie Institution, assigned to the American Embassy in Paris. He was a chairman of the U.S. radar mission to USSR in 1943, special rep to the Secretary of War, special advisor to the atomic development of the bomb. Incredible. It's interesting how they used. He's also. This is really. This is really something I didn't even tie this together. Listen to this, guys. This other guy, his name is Carl Compton. Did I get that right? Yes. Achieved immortality is the man who told President Truman to drop the atomic bomb on Japan. Now, the first use of this horror weapon, that was the first time. He also was the director of the Ford Foundation and the Sloan Kettering Institute. Interesting how atomic radiation and atomic therapies are used for cancer treatment, and he's using it to blow up people in Japan. Interesting correlation. These correlations are so consistent. They're not. It's not a happenstance. It's not a coincidence. That's for sure. There's a correlation, and you can just bet your bottom dollar it's all connected. Even without having to look too far, you can just find the connections between these people. I mean, this guy works at Sloan Kettering, yet he was the one that said, let's blow up these Japs. Let's drop it on the Japs and blow them up. Kill them. Get rid of them. Let's see how many we can kill. It's like Nixon and having that speech with It's on the White House, the Watergate tapes. Nixon talking to Kissinger saying, Henry, how many people would we kill if we blow up the levee? And it's interesting because that whole thing when we blew up the levee here and flooded the farmlands, destroying that farmlands last year. Remember that? Here in America, the heartland of America, destroyed hundreds of thousands of acres and will never be able to be used again by blowing up the levees. Nixon says, hey, how many of these Cambodians would we kill, Henry, if we blow up the levees? I think that we would kill about 245,000, Mr. President. Oh, that's not enough, Henry. We need more dead. We need to kill more people, Henry. Think. I mean, I'm serious. This is really on record. It's crazy, and that's what they're saying. And he says, do you think we should use nukes? And then Kissinger's response was, I think that would be a little extreme, Mr. President. But this is how these lunatics think, and this is how these lunatics operate. Insane people with insane objectives who do insane things are running our world. And I can't even begin to tell you how it's all connected to these foundations. This is how they steal from us. This is how they network. Huh. For example, Charles William Eliot, who married Ellen Peabody, back to the Peabodys, studied European educational methods. He's the president of Harvard for many years. He promoted Hegelian school of determinism, which is what we're talking about constantly. Simon Flexner, who studied at the University of Berlin at Strasbourg, set up Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research, member of the Royal Society of London, many medical societies, on and on and on. I mean, this is a tremendous connection. They're all listed here. Their names, who they're associated with, the dates. I mean, this is an incredible work, and it's all accurate. It's all documented. It's all researched at the Library of Congress, most of it, for the congressional records. Not to mention, he's just an amazing researcher. It took him 40 years to compile this compile this work, and it's just amazing. So I don't want to get too deep into this next section, but the next section about these, see, it's all connected to the foundations were all started to sprout up around the turn of the century, the majority of them, the important ones, and the medical mafia was established also with the American Medical Association, founded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And we have, it was called something else initially, and then they changed it to the American, oh no, what it was always the American Medical Association. It was a bunch of doctors. But then the Rockefeller Foundation donated a whole bunch of money and sort of co-opted and took it over. And I think in 1896, starting to get into the medical mafia. And then, of course, you remember all these terrible things like the flu pandemic. Oh my God, in 1918. Wow, killed like millions of people. Just a year after he had created Big Pharma. I still wonder about bioweapons. You wonder about how things happened back then. I know they didn't have antibiotics, but, and there's no proof of that. And I'm not even I'm speculating. I'm not even assuming that he did that. But God, wouldn't surprise me if that was an attempt, you know. But now they couldn't do that because they realized they probably killed a lot of their own. So that's why they have bio-specific weapons now. Bioweapons, things that'll target certain races and certain people, types of DNA. I mean, this is like totally, absolutely like scientific, like it's like sci-fi shit, but it's real. We are in a scientific dictatorship. Well, we'll continue with this tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. There's a lot of great information here. Please check it out on the World Order. I'll go over some more things about the foundations. We'll be chatting about them throughout the week. I'll also put some news segments in here and there, like we were talking about the fetuses that are covered with gold that were discovered at Bilderberg. That's just insane, and young babies, fetuses, and just disgusting. I mean, I don't even know how to quantify that. But we will move on. We'll talk about the foundations a little more tomorrow. Please tune in 9 to 10 p.m. here on truthbroadcastnetwork.com. And please tune in to Harry Link right now on Death to the New World Order. And thanks out to Harry again. Take care. God bless you. See you tomorrow.
Believers, deceivers, they're everywhere when you try to live. You know it, they show it, they always take and they will never give up. Not gonna be the only one who has something to say before they take me away. It's written in their lives. Every word they say, they want to take your life.
all of these things that have transpired in the last 160 years. So it's interesting, and again, I'm going to read a lot of the stuff from here. We had left off talking about the beginnings of the Carnegie Institute. Now, Gilman, who was Daniel Coit Gilman, Vice President of the Peabody Fund and the Slater Fund. He was also President of the University of California. He was the original incorporator of the Russell Sage Foundation and the Carnegie Institute. The fact that one man was an incorporator of 3 of the most influential foundations in America shows how centralized the control of these supposedly autonomous foundations has always been by a few ruthless individuals. Gilman is usually listed as a charter member of the World Order because he, together with Andrew Dixon White, Timothy Dwight, also set up the Russell Trust at Yale in 1856 to finance the Skull and Bones organization, whose members are leading frontmen in America, W. Averill,
UN Agenda 21, bailouts, sellouts, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, false flag terror attacks, Bill Gates, Henrikism, New World Order mind control, Bank of America stealing homes with cut and paste mortgage loans, police, state, taser guns, FEMA camps, land run, Monsanto rules the food supply while Big Pharma dopes your mind. Prison system, puppeteers, foundations, fund the beers, fund the evil through the years, the world's not as it appears. CIA smuggles drugs while Wachovia and Wells Fargo launder them, then give the proceeds to the owners of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now the IRS takes money out of every single check. Money they created out of thin air and leave you with debt. They want to make you a serf, a slave to their demand. They want to take your life in every way they can. Fluoride, GMO, vaccines, chemtrails, United Nations genocide. The world they show us is not real. This is how they kill and steal. Rothschild, Bundy, Rockefeller, Club of Rome. On the Georgia Guidestones written in stone. Cut through the matrix, awaken to the lies. Do not be hypnotized. We are one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Most of this week regarding these foundations and information about them, because there is so much information and it will take quite a bit of time. And again, the information here has been well documented. This is a work that I have to give credit to the late Eustace Mullins, who was able to compile this over 50 years of his career as a researcher and author, writer. And as we were talking about the Rockefellers' front person, his right-hand man, Frederick Gates, Daniel Coit Gilman, Vice President of the Peabody Fund and the Slater Fund. Now these guys got together and they sort of modeled all of their other foundations after the Peabody Foundation. And they are all preaching we're going to for the benefit of medical science, for the benefit of humanity, for peace. Yeah, like the Carnegie Institute for Peace, International Peace. They're all fronts. They're all in many cases just the opposite. So it's very important to break this thing down, to see how this is happening. And I think that a key component is understanding that they have pooled their resources as a collective group of families to obtain this control. They want to have a technocracy that is controlled by them, that the little useless eaters such as ourselves, the true useless eaters, get cut off, and which are most of us in their eyes, and then those that can really, play ball with and are sharp enough to their liking will remain. So they'll have this group of a master race of humanity, a transhumanist, better than human. Again, gone into that a lot with other broadcasts. But these funds that have been set up were set up really to just avoid paying taxes and to start putting in this movement towards communism and world government and Good evening, this is Howard Nema of We Are Change Connecticut, and you are watching Truth Talk News. And we are talking from yesterday's show about the foundations. Now we have a lot of discussion about how this whole New World Order control grid actually came to be. And it did really come to be, as we were learning from last night's broadcast, that it does absolutely come from these foundations that were started in the mid-1800s, first being the Peabody Foundation. And then I'll go into more of guests today. As I said yesterday, we're probably going to do